Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right, we are finishing off Freddy vs. Jason on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Helms. I'm coming to you once again from 1428 Elm Street and Camp Crystal Lake. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest of details, where a serial killer's end is just the beginning of the jokes that we're going to make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to give mouth to mouth to an undead backwoods mutant. The one, the only Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
Once again, we are on the same wavelength. I was going to make a joke about giving you mouth to mouth when you're drowning, which is not at all not at all correct first aid protocol.
You know, I didn't learn much in my brief tenure as a Boy Scout, which of course I will remind listeners, I was the third youngest Eagle Scout in all of California when I earned the rank, simply to never have to wear the uniform again. I was also a lifeguard at a Boy Scout camp when I needed money for a car. And one of the first things they told us is don't give mouth to people who are currently drowning. Get them out of the water first.
And you tend to just kind of turn them on their side. Do you not?
Yeah.
See, when someone's actively coughing and spitting up water, you don't just, hem and haw and, ew, oh no, ew, while determining if you should give them mouth to mouth.
Yes. But before we get too far into this, Gina, I don't want to scare you, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. She is a writer for the vulture.com. And of course, she's also the co-host of one of my favorite shows, Disaster Girls. The one, the only Jordan Crucchiola. How are you doing today, Jordan?
In this pandemic time, I think on the scale of conditions, I'm doing quite well. I'm weathering it well. I'm feeling good. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm thrilled to be here with you guys.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. This is a weird confluence of events. I thought of holding off on asking you to be on the show until we had something that really combined the worlds of both of our podcasts. But you guys also cover creature features as
definitely.
a sort of animal attacks sort of disaster.
Yes.
And I feel like these two IPs smashing against one another is in fact a disaster in the making.
This is King Kong versus Godzilla of the horror universe, basically, as far as, what we've given our super killer sort of Hall of Fame. So there are parallels here, and I think you don't even have to go that deep to find them. I think they're quite plain to see.
They very much are. They certainly are titans. I had forgotten up until this recording, and then I reviewed some background materials, that they had a Vegas Tale of the Tape press conference where basically Robert Englund badmouthed the poor guy in the Jason suit who couldn't talk back for a half an hour, which seems like not very entertaining. Like the clips they show, like, oh, well, that seems spicy, but I can't imagine sitting there for 35 minutes while it fucking happens.
No, that feels just torturous.
So, Jordan, what was your first experience with, again, this meeting of two giant horror icons? When did you first witness their grand battle?
I forget when in high school it was. It would have been later high school because I had my license to drive at that point, and I was a Hollywood video junkie. Mm-hmm. That was my store of choice, and I would go, and my move was to just walk through the aisles and either, grab things I'd heard of or find the boxes with the coolest pictures or the actresses that interested me most, and then grab them and be like, let's give this a shot. So obviously being a horror fan, it was like, okay, guess I better notch Freddy versus Jason onto the belt. And so grabbed that and took it home and then watched in the family room downstairs, which is sort of my little camp out where I'd watch all my movies and TV. And gosh, that would have been, what year did this movie come out? 2003?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I was a couple years behind the curve then. So this probably would have been or no, yeah, like right at the end of high school for me, this would have been a new release rental. I think of it now, and it could not be a better like case study in like the aesthetic tropes of the 2000s. So I'm really glad I watched it when it came out so I could be in the middle of those things and then now watch it again after the fact and have such a fucking time capsule of what the 2000s looked like.
Oh yeah, that's been a running observation since we started this.
Oh yeah,
God, the clothes, the hair, it's so very, very 2003.
Oh yeah, chunky highlights, underwear as accessories,
like, the tiny little lower back flower tattoo.
Absolutely.
And had either of you noticed that before this particular?
No, I think that they forgot to cover it. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it had probably been covered, or her shirt wasn't supposed to ride up as high as it did. But I don't think that was meant to be seen. I think that was a continuity error at best.
Keeping up with the continuity errors, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for a person whose virginity is made to be some sort of accessory or liability or both, lower back tattoo seems like an out of place sort of thing. Not that it really should be. Like, why would I care?
These are high schoolers, right?
Yeah.
Like, this girl would not have gone to get a tattoo without the permission of her parents, and her parents were not giving her that permission.
No.
Like, this was not like I got drunk and got a tattoo on my lower back kind of girl. Not that that's like a good or bad kind of girl, but the character as we are presented with would not have done that.
No, she has to be cajoled into just gathering with other people and by someone who seems to live for the idea of just cajoling her to do things.
Yes, exactly.
So who's still left alive at this point in the movie? Too many people. Honestly, for as many deaths as occur in this film, the lead core group really does survive up until the very end.
Yeah.
You have your Lauries, your Kias, your Lindermans, and your Wills, and then Freddy and Jason. And inexplicably, Laurie's dad survives. Which,
yeah.
Okay, here's something that I just want to, let's get this out of the way, because this could last forever if I let it. The idea here is that Will saw Laurie's dad kill Laurie's mom.
Uh-huh.
In a flashback, inside of Laurie's dream, we see Freddy somehow killed an adult woman.
Yeah, I still don't understand this twist in it. I still am not clear on how this works, or how the fact that it was actually Freddy absolves the father from kidnapping people's children and warehousing them in a psychiatric hospital.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that does not make what he did any better.
Yes, this is not a grand absolution for all of these things.
Right. It just meant one of the horrible things that she thought he didn't do. But he did all the other horrible things.
Right. And it didn't, like, we don't need that moment doesn't need to happen at all, because we also don't need that for us to know that Freddy's a bad guy. And she doesn't need it to know that Freddy's a bad guy. Like, we've established at this point the like murdery death nature of this character, despite the fact that they have so much time spent in this movie trying to remember who Freddy Krueger is. By then, it's pretty much sold. And we don't need this particular murder to be like, oh, well, that's a bridge too far.
She was going to let everyone be bygones up until this point. But the fact that this person who has never been known to kill an adult in the dream realm decided to do that. And I just don't know how it advances Freddy's agenda.
Yeah.
I don't know how it helps Freddy be the Freddy guy if he kills this dude's wife. How does that help? Again, we've confronted things in other movies like part 7 of Friday the 13th. We're like, how does Bad News Cruise turn one telekinetic girl equals $?
Right.
It doesn't make any fucking sense the way he goes about it. This is the same thing. Like, Freddy is bad at business. He's bad at the Freddy business, for Christ's sake.
You're right. It's the one. It's a case of you had one job. Freddie has one job, and he seems to keep fucking it up.
Oh man, he sucks at it. And this is a particular circumstance where in this movie, he's kind of bad at a couple things. Let's start off right in the opening section of this movie, which this flashback
Yes.
to Camp Crystal Lake at
Yes.
some indeterminate time in the actual Friday the 13th franchise. I think it would be 1957.
Okay.
Because a year later is when Mrs. Voorhees kills the two kids in the boathouse who are dry humping while wearing polyester shorts.
Right. And if that happened during a camp period, a summer camp period, then this would have been allegedly the previous summer
Correct.
camp period.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems that tracks.
Yes. So we will grant you that this is not we have to interpret this as Freddy's interpretation of the events.
Right.
Or he's using Jason's nightmares about the event to bring this to life. Just like I don't believe Jason lives on an island surrounded by decapitated heads and keeps a spare mask hung on his closet door.
A prepared serial killer.
Yes. Again, very neat room for a guy who hasn't bathed because he's essentially dead. We'll get back to that. The essentially dead guy. But so we're in Camp Crystal Lake, and we're seeing a bunch of assholes throw rocks at a tween Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Lori appears only semi-wet. Those keeping track of when Lori is wet, semi-wet, or fully wet, this is semi. Although she will get drier as we go.
Yes.
We get to see some campers put a sack on his head, I guess is a part 2 reference.
Yes.
I'm sure everyone involved in this really broke a hand patting themselves on the back for that one.
Yeah,
But-
Freddy has an interesting idea of how summer camps are operated.
Summer camps and sex.
That counselors are just out there boning in broad
Yes.
daylight.
Broad fucking daylight, fully clothed. This is what Freddy's idea of 2 semi-adult people having sex is.
Well, and that moment when we see Jason being harassed, Lori is distraught that nobody's helping this little boy and she doesn't know who he is yet. And then we see her cut over, like she looks over and it's the debauchery of the counselors. And you see the counselors just going at it. And one of them then transforms into Freddy, and the woman he's having sex with, of course, becomes a naked dead woman's body. And the level to which this movie had to take every single opportunity to do the gratuitous thing like was de rigueur in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Really, to me, gets at the problem that we're going to talk about when we come to Kia's imminent death and how the buildup to that, where that is an example of why I don't trust the screenwriters in sort of their take on how a very controversial line in this movie played out, because Freddy is a cad this entire movie to like a comical degree. He's a pervert, which we already know he is, but it's jacked up to this like aughts horror level of like nihilistic comedy and like edgelord humor. And I think this scene really shows us how much in 2003 we really are.
Oh yeah. It's very much, this ain't your mama's, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
And I mean, this is your extreme guitar riff, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of butt rock alone. I mean, there are elements in this that just, Freddy becomes the anti-Jason in that Jason uses your fuck style against you to kill you.
Right.
Freddy is so devoid of genuine sex appeal and knowledge that when he is supposedly having sex with this dead naked girl, the sound effect sounds like an eraser being run over by a rocking chair.
Oh,
That's fucking Looney Tunes. What am I supposed to be afraid of here?
Right.
If it's a good time, this isn't a good time. And if it's supposed to scare me, it's not doing that either. It's this weird middle ground where he's too much. There's no feel good Freddy going on here, where we started to get 2 and 4 and 5 and unfortunately into 6, where all your fears that he uses against you, he's like trying to help you work through them to death. Here, that's all out the window. And it's kind of like they're working so hard to make these inconsequential things work with the canon that they forgot the consequential things to work into canon. But then again, no one knows how Freddy works.
I feel like Freddy at this point in like his mythology, it feels like what the people who put this together created was Freddy is a reply guy on Twitter.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like
totally.
he, you know, he's gonna step in with the worst rejoinder, something that's just obscene. And you're like, do I know you? And he has 17 followers. There's 9 numbers in his handle. He's so fucking annoying. He doesn't like Trump, but he does MAGA shit just to piss people off. Like that's Freddy at this point, and that's not Freddy Krueger.
Now, I definitely like my Freddy when he doesn't talk that much. And he doesn't talk a lot in the first couple, but mostly the first one. The second one, he kind of becomes a little more conversational. Yeah. I really like the kind of muttering sort of, you could barely hear him, Freddy. And here he's just wisecracking and being gross. And I don't like it. It's, a lot of it spells out things for the audience in a very, large type with no, big words to make it hard to understand way. and it muddles the message a little bit because I feel like almost like the audience is supposed to kind of feel a little sorry for Jason.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
He's in our Godzilla versus Kaiju showdown. Jason becomes our Godzilla who will save us from the actual, like the adversarial Kaiju.
Yeah, which makes what happens with Kia. It's like, okay, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. Obviously the audience is supposed to think it's funny that that she gets killed because she's sassing off and she thinks she's got the upper hand, but she doesn't. But then it's Jason that kills her, even though she's kind of on his side.
Yeah.
But I don't know, am I supposed to feel sorry for Jason because he was picked on as a little boy? I don't know what the message I'm supposed to take away from this is. It's very, very weird.
Well, and I think that's such a crucial kernel to Turn of the Millennia horror, where there was truly nothing to take away from so much of it, to where when I watch them now, I watch movies from that era now, not all of them, not the legitimately really good movies like Wreck and Let the Right One in. Like, yes, those are great movies in any time period. But like House of Wax, all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres, Carriers, like movies that were just about putting WB cast members and like hip hop and R&B stars into scary movies and capitalizing off like the zeitgeist buzz of people. And it was like before the small budget movie was dead. So these movies got way more money than they should have. And it's just, I've come to find a lot more joy in it than I used to, but it is truly the cotton candy era of this genre.
They want to return it back to something, but no one can quite recapture the tone of what they like.
Right. Like this was we covered this in the last episode, but like the part where Jason turns back into a little boy and he's crying and Freddy's like torturing him. And I'm like, what am I supposed to be feeling here? This is upsetting, but I don't know that it's upsetting in a way that the filmmakers. I think what Jordan said is, let's see how far we're willing to take this. Like, here's a little handicap boy that Freddy's tormenting, and it's like, Jesus Christ, okay, I get it.
I think there's this era. It seems like it's that turn of the millennium time where it's the late 90s into early 2000s, where you have this era of excess in the genre that like it started, I call it the sexy horror era, because it started with Scream and it became like the attack of we started refranchising again, like we did in the 1980s. It's like, oh my God, we had a really good idea. Let's do it over and over again. Let's get the hottest cast members we can. Let's shove them in here. Let's write on the backs of their names for marketing. And it's like these hilarious, but to me, super endearing ensemble slashers like Valentine, obviously the continuation of like the I Still Know What You Did in the Scream franchises. But then you have it bisected right in the middle by 9/11 And then everything gets really in the way that we, I think, most commonly identify it aligned with like Saw and Torture and Hostel. But the majority of movies coming out around that time were not torture tourism films. They were movies like this. It was the era of the MTV remake with a really nihilistic sensibility in a world that was sort of immersed in torture and the war on terror. So you got kind of the worst of all of our impulses, where it was excess, ultra violence, extreme humor that was like very, popularized by sort of that like Sarah Silverman sort of mentality, like how far can we take the joke politically incorrect sort of thing. And you have that all boiling down into the horror genre of horror cinema of the era that's also being given pretty sweet budgets by studios that are putting these movies out. And you see it now and you're like, holy shit, this was just everything in the kitchen sink. And everybody followed their worst impulses.
They all learned the wrong lesson.
That's exactly it.
They saw Scream and they saw you. I Know What You Did Last Summer, and they go, well, what worked there? Well, what worked there is you invested in characters and you made a twisty plot. You also created great action sequences and suspense sequences that would hook an audience.
Yeah.
And an executive looks at that and goes, Henleys, tight Henleys, low-rise jeans. If we like the prettier they are, the better.
Yes.
And also, let's work in more gore, and people want more gore and people want more nudity because that used to be part of it. And you're like,
yeah,
I mean, like you would have a sequence, but it wasn't like the reason you went. It's kind of like going to someplace and ordering a shake and they deliver 15 cherries on top. And I'm like,
Here's
well, that's why you're here, right?
Maraschino cherries.
You're here for beautiful people and sexiness. Like, no, there's like all that shit underneath you've ruined by pouring gross formaldehyde cherries on top.
Well, I think what you say there is such an exact important thing to get at, which is learning the wrong lessons, because you have studios which you should never rely on to learn the right lessons for something. And then you have, it seems like there was this interesting, we'll say, generation of filmmakers that seemed to have taken all the wrong lessons from the movies that they revered and were raised on in horror growing up. Like this, like, Nightmare on Elm Street, like Friday the 13th, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they apparently the things that these men, because they're all men, we all know this, that these men took from these movies growing up was like, fuck yeah, boobs, fuck yeah, blood, and that's it, right? Because that's most of what that era was.
The unfortunate infusion of CGI over practical effects.
Totally.
Because someone said they cost less because it takes less time, because they're reducing the filming time.
Yeah.
In order to maintain your CGI budget, but you're making the effects work by not letting the effects happen on set.
Yes.
So you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul, and in the end you get shittier things out of it, and it all becomes a little bit more inconsistent. For example, one of the inconsistencies of this movie, it is a small detail, but it is infuriating, is that Freddy's teeth keep changing.
They really do. His teeth keep changing. His eyes keep changing. At one point, he goes back to the classic pizza face makeup, which I liked, and when in another scene he didn't have it anymore, I'm like, oh, I missed that.
Yeah, I don't want to see him with the weird vagina nose. Like, put him in the old makeup. It's fine so long as he's a little wet. We just don't want dry Freddy. No. We need a little bit of moisture in there.
It's like you have Robert Englund, you have the piece you want. It's not like you wanted to innovate this with a new actor. So why are you doing this with like the aesthetic of him? He's still got the glove, he's got the sweater, he's got the hat, you've got Robert Englund. Why do you keep toggling with the central part of it beyond those components, which is like the skin and the face? Why?
Yeah, at one point he's kind of like demonic Freddy, which is like fine if you want to like, oh, he's becoming more like the dream demon in this one book. Like, that's fine. You contain it to that one thing so it has impact. But if he's constantly morphing how he looks, it just looks like you weren't paying attention.
Yes.
Speaking of paying attention, the counselors aren't, and so Jason begins to drown, and Lori, being the kind, wonderful, lower back tattooed individual that she is, runs to the dock and attempts to rescue this child. When she discovers it is Jason, So she rears back
Yep.
and says his full name, Jason Voorhees. And I was kind of waiting for it to really stretch out like a mom, like Jason Michael Thomas Voorhees.
And in that moment, we learned that all lives don't matter to Lori.
No, that's like, this isn't helping. I'm not here for this. I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
But Freddy pulls Jason under the dreamwaves and causes the Jason in the real world to start leaking corpse juice. It's our old friend, Gina, corpse juice. This section of the movie is full of it.
Oh yeah, it's a spraying, leaking everywhere.
And for some reason, as you guys touched on at the very start, Kia is expected to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a person who's actively breathing. It's like, if he's spitting water, you guys, that means he doesn't yet need mouth-to-mouth.
No, the high school that they go to, which is overly crowded in the hallways and no one's seen a teenage girl cry before, they've never been taught any sort of life-saving maneuvers whatsoever.
No.
At one point, they start debating who's going to do it, and the contender, in my mind, for line of this section of the movie is Kia. He has asthma.
Come on, Kia, have a heart.
For crying out loud, he cannot give mouth to mouth to that backwoods mutant. He has asthma. That's a perfectly legitimate excuse.
It's a very Big Brother moment for Jason Ritter's character over Linderman at that moment. Like, How dare you, Kia? His asthma.
He has an inhaler, Kia.
Can I also point out in this moment that Monica Keena is the worst actor I've ever seen of pretending to be asleep.
Oh.
Props to her. Her mirror face does not quit. She is sucking in. She's serving cheekbones.
Oh, yeah.
She's pursing out the lips. She's leaving like the penny gap between them to maximize volume. She is not letting that shit slip one single time when she's asleep in this movie.
She's very in control of her instrument. There's an arched back at all times.
She looks like she is starring in a community theater production of Sleeping Beauty. She's just very, very aware that I must look attractive for some reason.
Yes.
While you are zonked out on a very strong prescription sleeping medication, which, I don't want to talk about like personal experience, but generally you're not looking like that when you're under the influence of a very strong sleeping medication.
Right.
It's a very pretty sleep drug that she's on.
Yes.
But this causes a practical stunt sequence, and we love practical stunts here on the show, where this van hits a tree and it goes over on its side. And it sends Jason's body flying one way and the rest of them another, and give it up to the props guy, to the stunt guys. They did well with that. Yeah. But unfortunately,
remarkably, everybody just gets up and walks away from it. I think Linderman's got a tiny little streamer of blood on one side of his head. That's about it.
Yeah, he hit his noggin. It's unfortunate. Kia is kind of miming that she may have hurt her leg, but then it stops. She can't keep consistency between scenes. That would be someone telling her that, and apparently no one talked to her.
This movie allegedly had a director, but I have my suspicions.
It is such an odd difference between this and the controlled, maniacal brilliance of Bride of Chucky.
Oh my God. I mean, Don Mancini and Chucky have only gotten better with age.
True. Yeah.
Chucky's actually the only super killer franchise that has evolved over time.
Yes.
And
it's the super franchise.
Yeah,
it's unkillable because you have someone who actually knows what to do with it in every era. It is so far
and cares
way ahead of everyone else.
And cares.
Yes. And is able to reinvent itself towards the era in a non-horrible way.
Yep.
It doesn't tend towards the trend. It just leans into a vibe and is able to surprise.
Yeah. And the only purpose at a certain point, like at least past the second movie of any of these super franchises, the only point of them is to recreate the original over and over again but in marginally different ways to like resell it. But it's just about, hey, remember when you felt this way about a character? Well, we're going to make you feel that way again and make you spend money on it. Whereas Chucky is a whole contiguous journey of that character's entire life, starting in like 1988 to the present. We are with Chucky for decades, and his entire evolution over the course of it. He's not just reincarnated every episode so we can send him to space or put him in Manhattan or like introduce him to a new set of high school kids. Like that is not the point of the Chucky franchise.
No, I bow it. I don't think that we can really approach it here because I also feel there's a level of competence to a lot of them that we enjoy a level of incompetence here.
Yeah, and I love incompetent horror movies. It's a favorite of mine.
So they managed to walk their way to Camp Crystal Lake. Meanwhile, Laurie is having a dream which Freddy sexually assaults her.
Oh yeah, and if not, like he's not actively raping her, but is really enjoying making jokes about raping her.
Yes.
As he's like sadomasochistically like cutting pieces out of her chest with his knife hands. And what is the line when he's like, I've got to warn you, like the first time tends to get pretty messy. And it's like, oh, that was something we needed to say here. That was necessary.
And this leads us to what we will be getting to in just a second. I want everyone to remember this. Once we get to Kia's death, it's not this exclusive component.
Yes.
Where
absolutely not.
The grossness is walled off on all sides. It's only this one incident which we all find regrettable. It's a series of individual decisions which all allow permission to get grosser and weirder and more off base.
Absolutely.
To the point where the Kia thing happens. And regardless of whose real idea it was, the simple point was, even if it was in the second happening right at that moment, it still lasted until the final edit of the movie and they projected it on screens. And now I have a Blu-ray of it.
It is the logical endpoint of Freddy's entire persona throughout this entire movie.
Yes. So they reach Crystal Lake. They find themselves a little rundown cabin, which seems to be next to a construction site. And that's a movie that I would genuinely like. I want the movie where they build a mall next to Crystal Lake and that reawakens Jason. That would be fantastic. Oh my God. See, you can put that in the snow because then you have the excuse of people coming even when it's snowy outside. Because of course, Northern New Jersey, the snowiest place on earth. I know we all want Jason in the snow, but folks, it's Northern New Jersey. All right. But during this action sequence, we get a lot of things happening in a very quick succession. They drag Laurie's body and they're still trying to wake her up. Jason bursts in through the door, but it's not a great door burst, in my opinion. They're more focused on this sudden appearance of a gas tank or a gas container and an open flame. Where the fuck did where did that open flame emerge from?
Very good question.
Did they come with tiki torches?
Somebody set up for them.
It must have been lost in the edit. But during the sequence, Kia hits Jason with the pipe, which is fun.
I was glad that she got active in that moment and that there was like an offensive tactic that was taken against them. I was like, all right, step up. Somebody swing away.
Yeah, we're starting to get to the action sequence of this. And so we're seeing people, step up their game. Linderman attacks with a flagpole because he's sick, but he's not well. And flagpole sitter, everyone.
I got it.
It's a flagpole sitter joke.
But in Flagpole City, he was not sick, but he was not well.
Yeah, because he's not sick, but he's not well.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you now.
What did I say? Did I ruin the joke?
No, I think I might have heard you wrong. You nailed it. This is my fault. I'm guesting and I'm just bringing the jokes down.
If I got something wrong, please tell me. And then Jason lights the whole thing on fire for reasons.
Right, yeah.
But during this whole sequence, Linderman gets wounded by being thrown up against a coat hook or something like that.
Awful. His death actually makes me slightly emotional.
Oh,
is this the first time that a character in either of these series like takes a little while to die of their injuries?
You're right. He makes it to like a whole different part. He makes it out of the building.
Yeah, and he just kind of dies
with this
alone.
With this little smile on his face. Like, what are you smiling about? he's like, yeah, I've had a good run.
It's so sweet. Like, Kia leads him out and leans him against a tree, and he just stiff upper lips it, and he's like, you go, I'll be fine. It's like, oh, Linderman, no. I wanted someone to find him at the end, and he was like that moment where someone falls into the frame, and they're like, guys, I've been hurt, but I'm okay. I wanted that for Linderman.
Now he's lost a lot of blood.
Oh, so much. It's just pumping out of his body. Poor Linderman.
During this, Will drags Lori's hand across open flame, and so she wakes up, because why not? As she wakes up, she grabs onto Freddy in the dream world, and then he pops into the real world, and okay, baby, we're on.
Yeah.
We're into our third act action sequence.
I do like Freddy's little like, what? Look, he just looks absolutely startled, like he just stepped on a Lego, and it's the best look. I love it so much.
It's like a dog that ate all the toilet paper, and they're like, "What? You're home?"
I don't know what canine came into this house and did that, but I am shocked.
I am offended on your behalf right now.
I can't believe this mess that you're gonna have to clean up. I would, but I don't have thumbs, so. I will hunt the real toilet paper killer until my last day.
Which is what the end of this movie is going to be. He's going to hunt down the real toilet paper killer.
That's right. Cue the butt rock. Cue the nut shot. Cue defenestration, because Jason hates windows. That's a long-standing thing, man. He hates doors and windows. Anything you come in and out of, he's not into it.
Good point.
My bitch counter broke. At one point, I had a running bitch counter. And I rewatch sections too many times to keep it accurate.
Right.
I've heard it's 6, but that feels insanely low.
Oh, does Freddy exclusively refer to Laurie as bitch? Like, I think that's just her name in this movie for Freddy.
Yeah. Laurie, bitch girl with no last name.
He sounds like, when you are like on like a public bus or something like that, you hear like a bunch of like 12-year-olds.
Yes.
And every other word they say is fuck. And it's like, oh, you just discovered that word.
Right. Yeah. That's now part of your daily routine. Good for you.
Right. You just find a way to use it as much as possible. I feel like that's Freddy with bitch.
Yes.
That one sequence in Dream Warriors. And listen, it works. It works in that thing. But it doesn't, like Freddy's tongue. Sometimes you have to let it go, baby. You just can't keep going to the same fucking well. If all we did at Kill by Kill was just sing toilet over and over again, it wouldn't have as much impact. You have to let that toilet thing just happen when it's natural.
Just let it be natural.
Just let it be natural. Here, it's just like it's his catchphrase.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's not that catchy.
No, it's like a verbal tick at that point.
So that brings us to this section that we have been teasing. We have been talking about it literally since the first volume of Freddy versus Jason, and that is Kia's death. Let's start with Oh Sweet Dark Meat. Which fuck you.
Yep. That's what I'm saying. This, like, the idea that we will object to the impending homophobic slur so exclusively in this movie when there are jokes like dark meat directed at Kelly Rowland, when there are rape jokes directed at Laurie. Like, are you kidding me that this is going to be our focus of our selective outrage in this entire... Okay, sure. He's exclusively calling Laurie bitch throughout this whole movie. But yeah, let's focus on this one thing as though without this one transgression to be like, oh, modern classic. Classic.
We'd be showing it to school children in 5th grade. So they would learn about the art of cinema.
Yeah.
And it just gets weirder after that. Like the whole like, oh, you're compensating for the size of your dick, which
my God.
I guess I'm fine
it's just
with.
like,
It's not,
stop it. I mean,
it just feels juvenile. And maybe that's the point they're trying to go after, is that she's trying to emasculate Freddy to distract him, but to what end? And then on top of that, you get the F-bomb, and I, again, don't believe this is an isolated incident.
No.
Even if it's improv, it wasn't.
That was in the script.
Yeah, and like I've pulled up the interview where from Bloody Disgusting, where the writers are asked, and the quote in response is, "All we can tell you is we didn't write it, and we were really shocked when we heard it in the movie. We complained about it after the first screening, but it was never changed. It's a real stain on the movie, in our opinion. What about everything else you wrote?"
Yeah. That's the main problem.
Like, if you did voice a concern with this, say you didn't come up with it, you did want it to be taken out after first screening, you have not established enough credibility for me to actually believe you are telling the truth in that quote, given the entire screenplay that has come before it. I'm sorry.
And this particular sequence, just from the start of it to the end of it, feels like it may have been improv, in the fact that no one knew how to kill off who would arguably be, outside of Robert Englund, the most recognizable person in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously there's probably pressure from her end to make this memorable, to make it something, because she's dedicated this much time to doing this bullshit.
Well,
But
and it was an unfortunate part of common vernacular in 2003. It's not surprising that in a movie that's going to go to extremes, in an era where extreme is what we want, that this language is going to surface. That is an unfortunate artifact of that time. I don't think Kelly Rowland made that up on the spot. In the event that she did, or in the event that the director was like, you know what would be great is if you call him a faggot in a Christmas sweater. I think that'd really play right now. There was nobody in that era that was going to police that effectively, really, from an executive level out of a movie, because people weren't doing that at the time.
But the whole thing is gross.
It's gross. It's the whole thing.
The whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
So in the end, I feel like the screenwriters have, and we've said this before, so I won't belabor the point, but I feel that she is getting the Janet Jackson Super Bowl treatment.
Totally.
Here,
I totally believe that.
Everyone is foisting off like, well, she can take it. Nothing's really going to stop Kelly Rowland's at this time. And she's got plenty of money, and she's got plenty of power, and she's not going to talk about it because everyone else has put her up against being the one who made this up. And I feel like she's being railroaded.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything else points to that.
Well, also, I feel like, again, like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. Like, when it ultimately ends up being Jason who kills her, I'm like, yeah, is that supposed to be funny? Is that supposed to be shocking? Are we supposed to believe that she deserves this in some way? I don't, because I don't think the audience was supposed to like her. I mean, and if they were, they didn't do a very good job of writing the character.
They did a terrible job of that.
Terrible job of writing the character. But I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about her after going on this, oh, you're doing this because you have a small penis. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that when it's, she's ostensibly on Jason's side, and then he just kills her for no reason. Yeah. I mean, just to get her out of the way, I guess.
Yeah. I guess because she's an obstruction, like getting in the way of momentum at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, it's very telling too that however this sequence of events played out from script to screen, that at some point there is the sort of germinating idea that here's how we're going to have this female character antagonize this fictional male character, and we're going to have her insult his penis and his masculinity. And those will be that, like, you look at the change in Freddy's face when she uses that homophobic term and associates him with homosexuality. He looks angry. He's like, wait, excuse me? Like, you see this change in his eyes. It's been all fun and games and puns up to this point. But as soon as she starts attacking those very conventionally aligned masculine identity points, well, then it's just, he's nonplussed. He's beside himself. And that is just so telling for like, what would the ultimate insult be? Oh yeah, penis size. Not like genocidal, psychotic, dream warrior maniac, but like, oh yeah, you've got a little dick guy who's not real, who doesn't need a dick because he's not procreating with anybody.
And then you have you think Jason's such a big deal? Well, guess what? He's right behind you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And from a concept standpoint, I can see setting something like that up. It's the execution that I truly do not care for.
Yes.
And as a result, I'm left with a very bad taste in my mouth.
It's true. And it's also so anticlimactic in how she, like, if this is going to be her self-sacrificing moment where she's like, hey, Freddy, like, you come at me, like, my friend's going to get away. It just, like, it's not like a heroic moment of self-sacrifice. Even at that time, it's just like, oh, she's dead now.
He just swats her out of the way like a fly.
Yeah, there's not like a struggle. They don't like, there's no like, grappling on the ground. She doesn't like get a shot in. She's just suddenly they're 10 feet apart. And then she is almost bisected and thrown against a tree. And you're like, okay, so much for Kia. All right, bye guys.
And in a franchise that has had sudden deaths like that, I mean, just to bring up part 7, because we already invoked it before, Melissa's death in that, where she takes a hatchet to the face and gets thrown behind the television, at least has an impact. Like, she doesn't believe this is happening. And we've seen her be not a nice person throughout the entirety of the film. And there's a feeling of, not that she's earned death necessarily,
right?
But that when people say, hey, we're in real danger, she's like, I don't believe anything any of you say. She leads herself into a bad situation.
Yes.
And so we are surprised at the suddenness of it, and we feel the loss of that, but not here. And it's all in the execution of it.
Yes, agreed.
So let us move past this terribleness and let's discuss another moment of the late 90s and early 2000s, and that is wire fu. Apparently, yes. Freddy knows kung fu. Gina, have you studied in a dojo? Have you crossed paths with Freddy Krueger? How many chambers of the Shaolin do you think he understands?
I have not seen Sensei Freddy training, but perhaps he does it in private, like a Kill Bill situation where he studies in isolation while doing endless chores.
Yeah, in isolation of the dream universe.
That's right. He's got those dream demon sperm fish.
Right.
They teach him, I guess,
totally.
Even though they don't have arms and legs, but maybe they have a PowerPoint presentation or
I imagine it like Dune, like Lynch's Dune, where it's like the Weirding Way training sequence.
Sure.
Then it's him with those worms and they're floating around him and he has to attack them.
Yeah. Throughout this, we get a lot of it. Like, it's basically, how many times can we get Freddy to do not that much damage to Jason? And then when he does cause damage to Jason, all of a sudden, little did we know how much blood is contained within Jason Voorhees.
Everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's gushing.
He is an immortal ghoul. He doesn't need a cardiovascular system.
No.
Therefore, having lots of blood, unnecessary for him. He does not need to breathe. Therefore, needing to drown again.
Right.
Not necessary. As we brought up last week, and I reiterated today on Twitter, Gina, I wholeheartedly believe this is the realization of the entirety of this film sequence. If I see this motherfucker walk along the Atlantic Ocean floor, I'm not worried that he has a little bit of fluid in his lungs.
It's true. That's a very good point.
It's fucking wild. So they have this whole sort of gigantic action fight sequence.
It's like it's very Matrixy. Like, this is very much a fight that takes place in the Matrix universe.
Yes. And it's very blue. It feels very bride with the white hair sequence. I mean, this is why you brought Ronnie Yu to the set because you knew he would be able to pull this off.
Right.
And he does. It's just there are weirdities within it, namely how much blood comes off of Jason Voorhees. and then there's this whole thing where Jason gets skewered into the ground and
by a bunch of rebar.
And then Freddy, again, going back to his Looney Tunes roots that we really saw developed in Freddy's Dead, starts pushing this giant trolley of
Yeah, I
dirt.
don't know where the hell they are at this point.
They're at the construction site that's next to Camp Crystal Lake.
That seems to be like there seems to be a big like concrete element involved in this, maybe concrete manufacture. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that whole giant tub that gets swinging around and becomes this endless ping pong, unless you don't need it. Like, it's never making noise when you're just looking at Jason bleeding.
No, you're right.
But every other sequence, it's like pinging and causing Freddy to fall off of this thing. And they end up in this giant up close fight for 45 seconds. And it is useless.
It is. And God, you're right. It is long. It just keeps going.
It's just like, it's one thing to have the compressed air things go off, because I'm not seeing that in every movie. Like, yay.
Oh,
congrats.
like the like oxygen tank RPGs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The improvised Scud missiles.
Yeah, those were cool. That was cool.
Yeah, that's great. But 45 seconds of them just like tussling. Yeah. It's kind of like, hold on. Like a couple minutes ago, he was like doing giant flying V kicks, and now he's like, body shot. Like,
right.
Fuck that noise.
If this is all you've been bringing to the table all this time, I don't know how you made it all this many franchise installments, Freddy.
Yeah. But that giant cement pendulum knocks them clear out of that construction site. Sends them flying like you've never seen before, and they hit the end of the dock. And so now we're really into our denouement, because we're at the point where
we're in the Mortal Kombat final fight stage.
Yes. And somewhere someone is going for a flawless victory, and no one gets that. They just get a victory. But during this is when Laurie and Will decide to start dousing the dock in gasoline.
I have been really looking forward to talking to you guys about this, because did I miss it, or did that fire serve no goddamn purpose whatsoever?
It keeps them, I guess, from getting off the dock. It forces them to fight it out in an enclosed. It cuts them off from everything else. So I guess strategically it absolutely works, but I just don't, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And then for reasons I don't quite know, Laurie is sent to go back to the burning cabin to get two pieces of flaming wood, and is running water bra very much intact.
Yes.
Slow motion towards camera.
She reminds me of that scene in oh god, I can't remember which one of the Lord of the Rings movies it is, but there's like an orc running with like two torches.
Oh no.
I don't remember that orc's water bra holding up quite like this. It's again back arched the entire time. It is very unfair to this actress to be put in this position.
Yes.
And yet here we are. I'm just the reporter here.
Yes.
I'm just the observer. So she comes back with a flaming wood and throws it. Everything catches on fire, including a propane tank. And then we get, between the two of them, a conversation we do not see, where they're like, hey, do you remember that sequence in True Lies where the propane tank blows up? Let's do that.
Yeah.
And so they do. Meanwhile, on the dock, you're having a whole lot of like, I take off your fingers. I'm going to take off your arm. Right. I'm going to stab your heart. I poke your eyes out. It's a whole lot of like getting them down into where neither one of them is in any condition to continue fighting, and yet they do.
Yeah, immortals being dismembered.
Yes.
Yeah, I do like Jason's little puzzled look at his hands after Freddy cuts his fingers off.
Well, at least that's consistent. That's a flashback to that part 4 thing where his hands split open and he's just looking at it like, oh, the fuck, that can happen? Okay.
Well, all right.
Okay, well, you know what? That I got that coming. I come into a fight with the machete. I got a figure that sooner or later that machete is going to be used against me. But we get an explosion, and again, I'm going to give the film props. This is a fantastic explosion. It's excellent. They have this covered from every fucking angle.
It's true.
And you can tell the actual physical moment that tank goes off because a perfect circle of concussion goes out in every direction. Like, holy shit, that's a good explosion.
Yeah, that was a good effect. The team really came through on that one.
But yeah, basically you get down to this tussling moment before the explosion, and now that we've introduced the idea that their knives and machete are dicks in the previous scene, you just have them fucking on a dock.
They just keep they're just penetrating each other over and over again.
Yes.
On a flaming dock, which is really very gay.
It really
very
is.
Campy.
It's very heavy on the fluids, and they're really going for it.
Yep.
And it seems very satisfying to both of them, and I'm not going to yuck their yum.
Am I in love with this guy? Do I want to be him? Do I want to kill him?
Do I want to be inside him? Do I want him inside of me?
Exactly. It's a real dance.
Let's try it all and see what happens. And so they have this explosive orgasm.
Yes.
And finally, Lori crawls up on the dock, which we get to see her very delicate lower back tattoo.
Yes.
And Will appears to be okay-ish. They've both incurred some injuries. Freddy comes back out of the water with the machetes. It's a bit of a zig and a zag where you think it might be Jason. Turns out to be Freddy. Then Jason comes and sticks Freddy's clawed glove through his entire body.
Impales him with his own knived arm.
We gotta get bunked with your own body part.
Yep.
And that's a first. That's a fucking first on this show.
Yeah, no,
and
I mean,
probably gonna be last.
Because you think that, Jason punching Freddy like into the heart is gonna be like, oh, he's gonna rip his heart out and that's gonna be it. No, we're saving the true heart kill shot for Freddy's own dismembered arm coming through his back and out his chest. And that is the final blow. And that's a good idea.
And then Jason goes, I'm tired, I sleepy. And he falls off. It's like, that's all I got. Sorry, kids.
Yeah. It's been a long movie, guys. I gotta go.
I'm tired. Baby needs a nap. Fall over. And then Lori gets up and we get the Friday the 13th ending with Freddy, where she cuts off Freddy's head. And there you go. Pretty much the end of the movie, except for and then we never see Will or Lori again.
Yeah.
They're gone. They're forgotten. And then we get this denouement where Jason has regrown all his limbs.
Yeah, for
him.
Water is his fear, but it also seems like Crystal Lake restores him. Like water also seems to heal Jason.
It's the source of the death curse.
Yeah.
And that is what actually fuels Jason. So that it's like, I know these people paid attention because there's a lot of things that are right.
Right.
It's just that they decided to write it all out in the grossest way possible.
Yes.
But he emerges from Crystal Lake reborn anew with the head of Freddy Krueger. And then we get the ultimate Friday the 13th Part 2 nod, which is to a cut scene that we've never seen the light of, but we know was filmed, where Jason's mom winked at the camera.
Yes.
And we get it with Freddy's head. So one wonders if that is an actual in the dream realm rather than in the real world. We'll never know because honestly, we don't fucking care.
I mean, I would say it's definitely in the dream world because of the weird sort of like kind of dreamy white lighting and all. It didn't really.
Well, I wondered if that was fog on the lake. Is that morning fog on the lake?
Yeah, I guess.
Couldn't decide if it was real or dream. I couldn't decide.
I tend to lean into the dream because it's so sudden and everything is grown back so quickly.
Yes.
So I don't. Yeah, I lend towards dream as
all right.
Oh, I'm gonna let Jason think that he's back in business when in fact I'm still running his game. I don't know, man. The movie made enough money for them to make a sequel and they decided, fuck it. So there you go.
So here you go.
This is what you get.
I feel like I think maybe the most crucial lesson I can take from all of Freddy versus Jason was, I mean, it lets you know how much you should trust it early on when it kills Catherine Isabel so quickly.
Yeah.
Anything that would take Catherine Isabel out of the running in its very beginning minutes can go straight to hell.
Obviously, they didn't really know the market because you would honestly, unless they were thinking, well, the audience that we're going for is going to be into Catherine Isabel so much that when we take her out early, they'll go, well, I don't know who's going to go next, which is very untrue because they set it up in the most formulaic fucking way possible.
Yes.
But it has come to that moment where we must decide, we have to choose our own death venture. That is where we decide of the deaths presented in this movie. If we were forced to die one of those ways, which one would you choose and why? Up for bid, we have kind of impaled against something that like a coat hook and die alone in a forest.
Oh,
in a very depressing manner. Or you can get suddenly hacked out of nowhere and fly 20 feet into a tree. Or you can get impaled by your own clawed arm. Or have your heart torn out and just end up kind of sleepy and fall off. Here, Jordan, as our guest, I turn to you for your answer first.
I'm actually going to go with Kia's death on this one because it happens. There's almost no time for fear. She just dies so quickly. And the only screen aspiration I've ever had is to be the first death in a horror movie. And I think the absurdity of this death where she basically gets cut in half, flies through the air at a blinding speed, hits a giant tree and collapses to the ground like a rag doll, dying instantly, is that level of bombast that I would like as an opening death in a horror movie. So I'm going to go with Kia's death.
It is certainly one way to go. Now, how does your hair look in an ombre?
I can pull off, I think we would do a balayage in 2020 as a substitute for that.
Sure.
The chunky highlight, I think, would be tough on me, but I think if I went for like a black and blonde mix, I think that's the route that I would go. I don't know that I would do the red highlights for myself personally.
Okay. I think that's acceptable. Gina, what say you?
I was thinking Linderman because, like I said, he looks pretty peaceful. He looks resigned to his fate. But on the other hand, that also seems like a pretty painful way to go. So I am going to go with getting my heart ripped out and just taking a nice little nap, just curling up and laying down and getting a little shut eye. That sounds pretty good right now.
Yeah, that's relatable.
And you don't sink into the water right away. You're kind of like up at the surface for a little while the oxygen that's been built up slowly depletes.
That's all right. It's slowly sink like Jack Dawson. It's all right. Not bad.
You know what? I'm going to go with having a clawed arm shoved through my heart.
It's a great choice. That's a great choice.
Because even if I do survive that even for a little while, then I'm getting decapitated mere moments after that.
Yeah.
So I think
the drama of it, the drama of it is very impressive.
Oh man, my mom would be so angry if she heard you can't have an open casket because a clawed arm went through his chest and we don't know where his head is. It's worth it for that alone, in my estimation. And so that brings us to an end. But before we go, Jordan, tell people what you do and how they can find more about that stuff and consume it.
For sure. Well, as you mentioned, I am the co-host of the Disaster Girls podcast, in which me and my co-host Amanda Smith talk about disaster movies, old ones, new ones, made for TV ones, creature features. We throw those in there too. And I am also writing every day on New York Magazine's website, vulture.com. And we are delivering you really, the best of content in and out of quarantine time. So do check us out. I'm our resident horror and genre expert. So come find me.
Absolutely. I find you a vital Twitter follow.
Thank you. I like to think it's a good space. I like to keep a good space on Twitter.
Absolutely. Do it today, people. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
Excuse me. I'm a writer and associate editor at thespool.net, which I review movies and TV shows. By the time this goes live, I will have done reviews of the movie The Other Lamb, the HBO series Run, and other sundry TV shows and television and movies. That is thespool.net, and I am on Twitter under Porcelain72.
Oh, yes, I suppose I should say I'm on Twitter at Jorker, JORCRU.
Yes, you absolutely should. We're on Twitter at Kill by Kill Pod, Instagram Kill by Kill Podcast. We have the Facebook group and the page for varying levels of participation. And please rate and review us on iTunes. It allows us to be seen and heard by more people. Now, this is an end. This is 4 years. 4 years in the making. 4 years ago, we started talking about Friday the 13th. 4 years later, we have come to the end of Freddy and Jason.
That is nuts.
I never want to say the words Jason or Freddy ever again.
It's going to be weird if we have on a Freddy or a Jason as a guest.
They're going by their middle name for the episode.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
the only option.
What do you think? You?
But the body count continues, folks. We're not done. Okay. We're diversifying over here. So we're going to move on to an interesting new phase. When season 3 starts, our first guest is Eric Ziska. We're going to talk about 10 to Midnight, one of the grossest, weirdest Charles Bronson cop movies you've ever seen. It's kind of a serial killer thing. It's kind of a horror thing. And it's kind of just Charles Bronson being really right wing about a lot of stuff. It's oddly sweaty and naked.
And, waving a sex toy around.
What do you use this for? What do you use this for? Don't shake that sex toy at people. That's like Fight Club. That's the number one rule. Don't shake someone else's used sex toy at them. And that's just
a good rule.
We're gonna get weird here. We're gonna lay off the franchise a little bit and try to bring out some of the weirder ends of what people have enjoyed in the podcast. We're going to start with 10 to Midnight, but thank you for being for us for this journey, but don't stop. Like the body count continues, people. That's what I have to say.
Stick
Gina,
with us. Stick with us.
Stick with us.
Stick with them, you guys. Stick with them.
It's gonna get fun. It's gonna get a little gross, but it's always gonna be fun. A little gross and occasionally depressing, but never not fun.
That's right.
Much like the world itself.
Exactly.
Very much so. It is respite in this world, and we're all going to need it. And so for myself and for Gina and for Jordan, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.